Hello and welcome back to the Inmr podcast. Today we're going to be doing a very special podcast from my personal perspective. We're going to be talking about Brighton's first Europa League game against Athens taking place on Thursday night. We're going to do a bit of a preview, how the teams are going to set up, what I think is going to happen. Of course, as a Brighton fan, it's quite a big occasion, first ever time playing in Europe. So for these first three games, home to Athens, away to Marseille, and home again to Ajax, I'm going to do previews for all three of those games to sort of see what we can do and how far we can go in the group, and then hopefully eventually in the knockout stages if we win enough of our games. Obviously, I'm really excited to talk about these games, not only being a Brighton fan, but being able to attend them. But the first one is against Athens, won the Greek League last year, won their cup. They look like a good side. They haven't had the best starts this season. Looking at both teams' form, as we know, Brighton have had a great start. Yes, they lost to West Ham, but apart from that, it's been pretty much flawless. Most recently, beating Man United at Old Trafford. In terms of Athens, they haven't played as many games at all, really. They've played quite a few Champions League qualifiers. Obviously didn't get through, hence why they're playing us in the Europa League. In the league, their first game was postponed. They've drawn 2 and won 1. Most recently, they drew to Olympiacos in that derby. They drew 1-1. Although Athens haven't been in as good a form as Brighton, they have a lot more experience when it comes to European competitions. This is their 8th Europa League appearance since 2009-10 season, whereas this is Brighton's first ever European endeavour. And of course, because of that, we've never played each other before, so it's going to be difficult to sort of look at how each team's going to line up and play against each other, because there is no previous games to look back on. Never played them in a pre-season, and of course that's the only chance where we'd get to play them. So now that we've looked at form, I want to look at sort of how both teams are going to defend and attack, and the impact that's going to have on the opposing team. So let's start off with Brighton. As many Premier League fans will know, especially Brighton fans, De Zerbi's style is to defend from the front. He likes a high line, sort of a high risk, high reward playing style. Brighton did concede 53 goals last year, which is the most out of the top 7. But of course, we did score a lot of goals as well. That's where the high risk, high reward comes in. Yes, we concede a lot, but also we get those goals and we do really well going forward. And when we do defend, we often force the opposition onto one wing so that we can suffocate them, get the ball back high up the pitch, and go and score straight away. In terms of how this is going to affect Athens, I think they're going to be rushed into making decisions. Potentially a lot of mistakes are going to be made. However, if they can get through that high line, they can overload. It's just if they take their chances when they do get through that high line. In terms of how Athens defend, Mateus Almeida, their manager, similarly likes a high defensive line. He's very into intense pressing. They win the ball in the last third to create chances as well, which is quite similar to what we did, especially last season with Levi Colwill, for example, who won the ball really high up and then played the pass straight away into the final third. They like to do that as well. They like to force their opponents to pass backwards and sideways. As long as they're not moving forward, that is deemed as a success for them. They cover all passing options by man marking, which will prevent Brighton from progressing up the pitch. In terms of how that's going to affect Brighton, I don't think it's going to be too bad. Of course, De Zerbi's style invites pressure, so his players will be used to working around Almeida's style. I think Brighton are going to need to have a patient build-up. Of course, our defence is very, very good on the ball, and I do think that Brighton could eventually pull a player out of position. Potentially that man marking could get a bit jumbled, and I think when that happens, the midfield have to capitalise. I think it's going to be very much like a chess match, like every team is making very strategic moves every time. It's going to be really interesting to watch. In terms of Brighton going forward then, De Zerbi likes possession-based football. Players create space between attacking lines and always try to have at least one player free. As we've seen before, lots of people have analysed his sort of playing style and how he likes to bait the opposition in to create other options elsewhere. Brighton also like to overload on the wide areas, as we've seen with our very highly skilled wingers, and create numerical advantages in midfield. This could confuse Athens' tactic to man mark, all this different movement. Are they just going to be chasing shadows for the game and eventually lose their man? But if they play it right, Athens may not allow that one player to ever be free. So it could go either way. As I said, I think both teams have to be really clever with how they go about their tactics, because they could just nullify each other. Yes, Brighton are used to that high press and basing players in, but Athens are having that high intensity week in, week out. They could catch them out. In terms of how Athens attack, Almeida prefers a 4-2-3-1 on paper, although they've got quite a few wingers injured, such as Levi Garcia, who's a key player, So in recent games they haven't really been playing with wingers. I think they've been playing a 4-3-1-2, which looks a lot less wide. They like to split the centre backs to allow the full backs to push. They also like these overloads on the wing. They prefer to create 2v1s or 2v2s out on the flank, which is quite similar to what Brighton do as well in terms of getting it wide. So I think it's going to be quite end-to-end stuff on those wings. They prefer counter-attacking football, so they do leave men quite high up. In terms of how that affects Brighton, they can obviously counter with speedy players such as Matoma, Estupinian, João Pedro. On Dunk's 400th appearance, that goal where he just clips it through, Matoma's in, slots through Ferguson. It's a goal that could happen if Athens leave a lot of men up. I think they will get caught out if they leave too many men waiting for the counter. As I said, Dunk's going to be quite important. And another player who's doing quite well at the moment is Van Heck. He's replicating Levi Colwell's job quite well. And personally, I do think that Adam Webster is quite unreliable at the back. So I'd like to see Dunk and Van Heck in those two centre-back roles together. Hopefully won't be getting split by the Athens attack. In terms of key players in the game for Brighton, I've gone for Evan Ferguson as the first one. His goal scoring instinct is absolutely unbelievable for someone of just 18 years of age. Not only does he score goals, but he creates chances too. Last season in his 10 starts, he made 11 big chances. He's clinical and full of confidence and takes his chances well, and he'll need to in this game as Athens goalkeeper Athanasiadis had 21 clean sheets last season and only conceded 13 goals according to FotMob. So once Ferguson's in, he needs to take those chances, but he is usually very, very clinical. Another key player for Brighton would be Kaoru Matoma. He's got a great change of pace and agility, very quick feet, and of course, as we all know, he knows how to take on players and he often makes them look very, very stupid. He comes back and defends as well. Athens prefer to have a 2v1 out on the wing, so if Matoma's always coming back to support Estupinian and then maybe a midfielder comes across as well, I think that we could be able to shut down those attacks that they're trying to create on the wings. Final key player for Brighton, I've gone for Lewis Dunk. I don't really know how you couldn't. He's been outstanding, and I think these are the sort of games where he really shows what he can do. Those key matches for his club, he's just amazing. He's a ball playing centre back with great vision. He attracts that pressure to create space for the team, as we spoke about earlier. He's one of those players that likes to bait those players in to then play a pass through. As well as the pretty football where he can pass it around, he's also a no-nonsense defender, puts his body on the line right until the last minute. I don't think a lot's going to be getting past him on Thursday night. First player to look out for Athens is Ezequiel Ponce. He had quite a good game against Olympiacos. He was the only goal scorer for Athens, and he also was the most accurate passer in the game. Obviously, with them putting a lot of bodies forward, it shows that he can also set people up as well as get the goals. So I think he'll be one to look out for, and somebody that Lewis Dunk and Van Heck are going to have to keep their eye on. Another key player for Athens is Jens Johnson. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Across 2 games against Panserikos and Volos, Jens Johnson's stats were very impressive. He managed an 86% pass accuracy rate, completing 121 out of 141. He created 4 chances, 19 passes into the final third, and won almost 80% of his duels. He's very good going forward. He gets back and does the nasty tackles. I think he's going to be a key player for them in the middle of the park. He shields that back four really well. He's composed, helps in transitions. He's definitely the big one to look out for, in my opinion. The final key player, he's a bit of a super sub. It's Orbelin Pineda. Alongside Johnson, he performed quite well against Panserikos in that 1-1 draw. He came on in the second half and made a really, really good impact. Completed the most dribbles in the whole game, made 11 passes into the final third, 100% accurate pass rate, and won 78% of his duels. He does seem as though, a very forward-thinking player. The only thing I'd say was a weakness for him is his physicality. So maybe when he does come on, we have got much more physical players who could keep him out of the game. But he does look like quite an exciting player who creates a lot of opportunities, very versatile. Yeah, big threat going forward. In terms of who I think is going to potentially start in this game, I've gone a little bit safe. In goal, I've gone for Verbruggen, 2 centre-backs, Duncan Van Heck. On the left side of the defence, I've gone for Estupinian. Right back, I've gone for Joel Veltman. I know that Lamptey's been playing well, obviously picked up 2 assists against United on the weekend. However, I think playing it safe in that first game and having a back four that stays back. Lamptey obviously provides a lot more going forward than Veltman, but I don't think we need to go all guns blazing in our first group stage game. Joel Veltman would be a much better option because it's so early on in the group stage. It's the first game. It's not one of those where Lamptey's necessary, in my opinion. Two in midfield have gone for Pascal Gross and Billy Gilmore. Gilmore, I've been really impressed with this season. Obviously, Pascal Gross, very consistent, very reliable in that midfield. Gilmore, as I said, very impressive so far this season. Looks like he's finally finding his feet in the Premier League. On the left, Matoma, of course. On the right, Solly March. Bring on Ansu Fati maybe. I just think, once again, he's becoming more and more consistent, and I think being a Brighton boy, it would be nice for him to start in that first ever Europa League fixture. In the middle, just behind Evan Ferguson, I've gone for João Pedro. I really enjoy when he plays. I really like the way in which he fits into the Brighton team. So I'd like to see him start just behind Ferguson, and then potentially you could have those two up top. I think those two should definitely start. For Athens, I've gone for Athanasiadis in goal, Vida and Makudi in two centre-backs, full-backs Safi and Rota. In the midfield, we've got Eliasson, who's been quite consistent in my opinion. Looking at, some of the games he's played, he looks like he's a fairly good midfielder. Szymanski, Zuba and of course Johnson finishing off that diamond, and then Ponce and Araujo up front. Of course, Pineda could come on. Luckily for Brighton, Levi Garcia, who looks like a brilliant player, is still injured. He's really good one-on-one. He's a pacey winger, creates a nice spark in the final third, but he won't be playing by the looks of things. But it still looks like a pretty strong side from what I've looked at from them. Of course, they do enjoy playing down the wing, and that looks like quite a narrow formation on paper, but we'll see how they do. To finish off then, I'm going to go for my score prediction, and after putting quite a bit of thought, I think that it's going to be 2-0. I was sort of looking towards a high scoring game just because both teams are so all guns blazing, throw all your players forward, a lot of counter-attacking football, could be plenty of goals scored. But I think on the night they're gonna sort of nullify each other, because from what I've looked at and what I'm saying, it does feel like the teams are quite similar. That could be different on the night. Overall, I do think it's going to be 2-0 to Brighton. Hopefully, first 3 points on the board, and then they can go to Marseille and get a result there as well. That is where I'm going to end this podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back soon with another one.